you haven't already done the survey and the, what was the other thing? The rules. Make sure you get those done before the end of the week. All right. Chapter 1, this is going to be a bunch of vocabulary. So first off, data. Any information that you record about something or someone in like a study or experiment or something that you're carrying out, that's data. All right? And if you're trying to get context on the data, then you want to measure a few things. You want to talk about who, what, how, where, when, and why. These first two are going to be the ones that we're focusing on right now. So what are we measuring? That's going to be the variable. And who are we measuring? Those are the main ones. We'll start to talk about like the how and the where, those kind of things when we get to chapter 4. All right. So we got individual data points that we can measure. Those individuals can be called a case. A lot of times you'll see them called subjects. That's if the individuals are people. They're called subjects. And then we have individual observations that we can measure about them. So if we have a table, then we can use a row to distinguish each individual or subject that we're studying. And then we can call each kind of cell of the table an observation. And we can do this in our calculators. So how about your calculator? Stat. So there are a couple different menus that we'll talk about. The main one that we're going to use in this class is the stat menu, which it's stats. Makes sense. All right. But here's the first menu I want to show you, which is if I go into Edit, this will bring up a menu of lists. Okay, I'm clearing out my list. You guys will probably not have something in the lists. Is there anyone that has something in the list that need to know how to clear them out? Okay, so you go up. You go up to the list itself, and you want to hit clear. Don't hit delete. Delete will get rid of the list, and you won't have a list 2 anymore. Clear is what you want. Clear will clear out the data points in the list, and then if you hit the down arrow, it should get rid of it. All right. So then I can just take these different whatever data points that I have. Maybe I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I can just put them in. So all I need to do is type in the number, hit enter, and then type in my next number. So 8, 9. All right? So I can have something in that first list. Then I can go over to list 2. If I have another set of data, and enter that data in. Okay, so maybe this list is a bit more jumbled. Maybe I have, this is 25, this is 98, this is 34, this is 55, this is 16, this is 2, this is 78, 54, and 1. So I can have list 1 tied to list 2, you know, have each one be a certain like individual or subject. Or if they're not tied together, let's say that I've got this list of numbers, and I want to quickly order them from smallest to largest. One reason you might want to do this is like if you want to get the median. That's a reason that you might need to do that. There's a way to do that. In your stat menu, the first one, it's ascending and descending. So if I want to sort it from smallest to largest, then I can say sort A, and I can say I want it in list 2. List 2 was the one, so I can go second, and then here are my lists down here. So if I hit second and 2, that's list 2. And it'll say done. It did it. So then if I go into stat and edit back into my lists, now they're from smallest to biggest. Do not do this. Do not do this if the stuff in list 1 is tied to the stuff in list 2. Because before, like 4 was tied to a certain number. And now it's not anymore. Like 1 was down here and now it's up here. So that's going to kind of be lost if you start sorting lists wildly without abandon and don't think about how the data is tied to each other. And you can do sort D to sort descending. You want it from largest to smallest, it's going to go from largest to smallest. And you can, it's the same button presses. Again, if you hit second, and then the numbers are where your list menu is. Come back to it. For the what, the main word that we have for talking about what we're measuring is a variable. And variables can be kind of split into 2 sections. You can have categorical variables, or you can have quantitative variables. So we got categorical and we have quantitative. Categorical variable, just like it sounds like, will split things into categories. And then quantitative will give quantities or numerical things. All right? So brand of car, hair color, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, what high school you went to, gender. These are all categorical variables because they split into categories. And the thing we're interested in with the variable is which category do you fall in. Okay? Here's the important thing. Just because it's a number doesn't mean it's quantitative. Just because it's a number doesn't mean it's quantitative. So I could have something like age group. You know, if I have like 13 to 18, and then 18 to 25, and then 25 to 35, 35 to 50, and kind of split my ages into categories, then that's not a quantitative variable. That's a categorical variable because it's which group are you in. Versus a quantitative variable which would measure something like how much. Like height and weight would be quantitative variables. Because we can slide along the scale and you can be any number in the range versus just in these different groups. Okay, and the reason I'm sticking to this distinction so much is that it's important to know whether you're talking about a quantitative variable or a categorical variable. Because the kind of graphs or displays or tables that you make are going to look different if you're doing something categorical versus if you're doing something quantitative. Looking ahead to later on this week, it makes a difference between, like, with a pie chart, if you know what a pie chart is, you don't want to, those are for categorical variables because it's what percent are in this group, what percent are in this group, versus some other types of graphs which are for quantitative variables. You wouldn't put height on a pie chart unless you put them in the categories. Height, number of siblings, these are quantitative. Let's see. One indicator of quantitative might be units. And make sure you have units if you're labeling a quantitative variable. If I'm told that the weight of an animal is 12, well, there's a very big difference between a 12-gram animal and a 12-ton animal for how frightened I should be of it. Observations are usually recorded with words but can be numbers. Another example of a categorical variable would be zip code, because really that's putting you into a category of where you live. So you can also have variables be measured categorically or quantitatively. That can be a decision that you make. For example, if we're tracking, I'm going to use the SAT because you're more familiar with it. The SAT gives you a score, a numerical score, that can be quantitative, but it can also be put into categories where it talks about whether you met, exceeded, or didn't meet a certain standard. That's splitting it into categorical. Make sense so far? Okay, let's look at some examples and make sure we can kind of split these into categorical versus quantitative. I believe examples are next. All right. Usually I have people turn to someone around them and talk to them. I'm going to do that less this year because I don't want people getting too close. But throw out some examples of questions you could ask about someone. And then we'll put them into categorical or quantitative. Question number 2 on the survey, which asked, on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you feeling about the class? So in other words, it asked about something on a scale. And it measures it from 1 to 5, and you could get like I could run the data and get people's average rating and feeling about the class. Especially if I let them put more answers. If someone was wanting to put like, oh, I'm at like, not a 3 or 4, I'm more at like a 3.5. And that would be fine. And you could get their average ratings from there. Age, height, and weight, all those kind of things, those are also quantitative. If you get into things like, what do you do for a living? Where do you live? Those kind of things are categorical. Let's look at some more examples. Oh, before we do that, let's quickly talk about how, where, when, why. These are going to be talked about more later, but I want to touch on them real quick. The method that we use to collect the data is going to be important. It's going to be important for how much we can trust the data, what conclusions we can or cannot draw from it, all that kind of stuff. Where and when. So, data on, if you've got data for how people, about what people think about the future of MySpace, it would be important to know what year that study was done. Because whether it was done in 2006 or 2020, where the answer might be, what's MySpace? Most of you know and have Facebook. Okay. Back to the point. The year that the study took place, whether it happened in America or in a certain state or city, or some other country, or if they asked everyone around the world, all these things make a difference for how we interpret it. And then why? If we think there's some kind of motivation behind behind the data being collected. If we have data that the best pain reliever out there is Advil, but then we find out that the researchers work for the parent company of Advil, well, maybe we want to inspect that data a bit closer.